Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me in the back, everyone? We're good? Thank you.
Check. Good evening, everybody. I'm Marshall Schuster, the president of AIA Brooklyn. I believe we have a quorum here. We have enough members. We're going to call the meeting to order here. Just a brief statement that I wanted to let everybody know that Giuseppe Anzalone is running for the president of AIA New York State. So we're very excited about that. He was a past president back in 2013, I think. And he's been very involved with ACNY and outreach with New York State. So I think he'd be a really great resource for us. We're really hoping that he succeeds with that. Very excited about the Brooklyn Design Awards, which are open now. So if anybody has a project, please submit to that. I think that the submissions are due September 31st. Is that correct? Okay, coming up soon. And then there's an award ceremony, which is our end of year meeting as well. So yeah, lots to share after this panel discussion. Thanks to everybody who came for this. And I'm going to let James and Jeremiah introduce everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. Good evening. I am James Koster. I'm Executive Director of AIA Brooklyn. A couple of housekeeping points. If you didn't sign in, please do. If you're AIA, you get learning units for this. 1.5 learning units, actually. And tonight's panel is going to unpack for us the importance and methods behind supportive housing. I'm just going to roll right into the introductions. Jeremiah, my colleague, who is also a student at this school, is also going to share in these introductions. First, I'm going to introduce Mark Harari. Mark is an architect and director of design and construction at Breaking Ground. Breaking Ground develops and constructs affordable and supportive housing in New York City. In his management of the design and construction process, Mark works with architects, contractors, government agencies, stakeholders, multiple Breaking Ground departments that plan, build, and complete these residential projects that serve those who need housing the most. Mark is also an alum of Washington University in St. Louis. I think there's one of you here. And Jeremiah?
So yeah, lots to share after this. I'm introducing Jack Esterson, who is a partner at Think and principal at Think Architecture and Design. His work at Think centers on residential, academic, and healthcare and nonprofit arts and adaptive reuse projects. He takes an empathetic and humanist approach to every project and engages his clients through unexpected possibilities of design. In recent years, Jack's work has focused on supportive housing in many of New York's most underserved communities, with the goal of providing a compassionate environment for people in need while enhancing the neighborhood that they inhabit through thoughtful and lasting design. The work also includes affordable housing for low-income families and increasingly supportive and affordable under one roof. Jack is also a graduate local of Pratt Institute. He's an avid art collector, and he's also my boss. So
very, very important. I'm going to introduce Emma Williams. Emma is the Chief Development Officer at Brooklyn Community Housing and Services, where she leads efforts in fundraising, communications, and policy. Previously, Emma held similar roles at sister nonprofits, Children's Aid and Habitat for Humanity. Altogether, she has dedicated over 18 years to improving the lives of those around her in New York City and in her home state of Alabama. She is an alumna of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, and she holds a special certificate of diversity and inclusion from Cornell University.
And finally, last is Jenny Gillette, who's a registered architect. She's Chief Project Officer of New York City Public Housing Preservation Trust, which is a new government organization. Am I correct? Jenny Gillette is a registered architect in New York and New Jersey with 20 years of strategic project delivery expertise in both the public and private sectors, balancing subject matter with expertise with sensitivity toward community impact. She has delivered a diverse range of projects on behalf of public owners, including community and recreation centers, streetscapes and public plazas, regional transportation facilities, and below-ground infrastructure. She has also developed in-house programs for government agencies such as NYC, DDC, and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. She served on the Historical Preservation Commission in Montclair, New Jersey, and taught at Columbia Grad School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. She holds a bachelor's degree from Barnard College and a master's degree of architecture from the University of Texas. She's also LEED and DBIA accredited professional. So I think I've said enough now. Yeah, please.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Thank you to our wonderful introducers and to AIA Brooklyn and to everybody for coming out tonight. It was looking kind of rainy and weird, but as I was walking over, it looked better. I will try to keep my remarks short. We're trying to do that so that we can have an engaged Q&A period, but if I start to drone on, somebody, hopefully Emma, will kick me and just let me know that it's time to move on. But there's a lot to talk about tonight with these wonderful colleagues of mine. Interesting that we're going to start out with a brand new program, which is the New York City Public Housing Preservation Trust. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are and how we were founded, what our mission and our values are, what our kind of governing structure is, and then a little bit about our portfolio. I actually am really happy to be talking to a bunch of students because when I was in graduate school for architecture, I really had no idea that you could be a public sector architect, which is what I've been for the last 10 years after being a private sector architect. So I really wish that I could have started to learn and know about what it would mean to actually be in service as an architect at the same time. So just happy to share a little bit about that with you folks tonight. So who are we? We are a new government agency, like I mentioned. We were created by state legislation in 2022. There you see Hochul, Governor Hochul, signing us into law. We were founded to be a partner to NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, with a very specific mission, which is to accelerate holistic repairs and expand access to multiple funding sources. I'm not going to read every slide like this, but I think there are some key words on here that give context for what and why we are, who we are and why we were founded. But in order to really understand why they had to create something like this at a legislative level, it's important to understand what is NYCHA in our city. NYCHA is, as this slide said, it is a city within a city. It is enormous. The metrics can be different depending on which source you're looking at, but it is, really north of 175,000 apartments. It's one metric we'll have it as 1 in 17 New Yorkers. If NYCHA were a city, it would be bigger than Miami is one of the cities I usually quote, bigger than New Orleans, bigger than Atlanta. It is hundreds and thousands of people, and by some metrics, it's 1 million people. So it is people that you know and live with and work with. It's public servants that serve this great city. It's people all around you. It is a huge part of this city and really has been for a very, very long time. So why do we need programs like my program? We have something like, I think actually now we're up to north of $80 billion in capital needs, of course, across the portfolio. Like so many things in New York, we were pioneers in providing social services at this, housing infrastructure to residents, which means that by now the infrastructure is aging. It's very, very heavily used. It's been around for a really long time. There was a huge boom in construction for NYCHA in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and that stuff has not been maintained. There have been years, decades of federal disinvestment in the maintenance of these properties, and so what happens to 100-year-old infrastructure that is heavily, heavily used, you can only imagine. So really, the capital need of the agency is unbelievably enormous, and really multiple solutions need to be found in order to address $80 billion. So I throw this slide up here because if anybody works in government, you need to understand that the work that we've done has been sort of lightning speed. Like in government time, this is like 1 second. So it was, and some of you may know, and maybe this will encourage you to go home and do a little research. In 2019, NYCHA was put under a federal monitorship. There had been multiple lawsuits from residents, organized by residents. The Southern District of New York got involved, mostly around hazardous conditions at NYCHA developments, lead-based paint, mold, things like this. And so there's been tremendous organizational change as a result of the agreement that was signed with federal HUD. And one of the things that really was enabled by a lot of this really kind of dramatic stuff that was going on at the end of 2019 was that this idea for the Public Housing Preservation Trust was really put into action. So 2 years later, Governor Hochul signed it. Within a year or so, we had our board members. We had our president, Vlada Kniff, was appointed in September of 2023. And then I'll talk a little bit about the voting process, but we had our first property to modernize, to do a comprehensive renovation by the end of 2023. So from middle of 2022 to the end of 2023, we had it ended up being about a $410 million renovation project that we had to figure out. So if you, just to go a little bit into what exactly our legislation enables us to do, again, a little bit of this is really much more important if you're in the public sector trying to maneuver around public sector procurement, public sector project delivery, trying to get design and construction done. One of the things we are able to do is we're able to use different procurement methods than most other city agencies. And I have a whole other presentation on that, on alternative delivery and design build and what we're able to do. So New York City itself has been really able to do design build for only a few years. Our legislation expands that dramatically. We can do different kinds, more flexibility, and that's really primarily why they hired me, is because I have experience in that. The other thing that's pretty critical is that we are able to raise debt. We're able to take out loans in order to fund these comprehensive renovations that these development needs. Also completely unique for a city agency. I worked for the Port Authority for a little while. Has a little bit to do with them, where if you know anything about them, they're kind of this unicorn agency as well. We can issue bonds, we can take out loans, we can do all these kooky things that private sector people take for granted, but as a public sector agency is completely mind-boggling. Resident partnership, this is written all over our legislation, that residents have to have a voice throughout the process. So it begins with when a development is identified to be possible for our program. Residents actually have to vote, and I'll talk about that for a second, but they have to opt in. They are our partners from day one in having this comprehensive modernization, this big renovation come into their lives. Residents have to be part of the design and construction oversight. We have residents in our board of trustees. It's just all over our legislation, and also all in our personal, sort of, not personal mission, but our organizational mission above and beyond the legislation. So a lot of work gets done to people in this city when it comes to social services, and our intent is to do projects with people. So that's just part of everything. Excuse me. And then oversight and asset management. So one of the key differences to our program relative to other programs is that we retain NYCHA as the property manager at these developments. So who you paid rent to and who you went and saw about a broken sink is the same person. There's continuity of a public sector workforce here. This is a pro and a con, depending on who you are. If you're a bank who's lending us money, this might be a big con. NYCHA doesn't exactly have a tremendous track record in maintenance, as you saw from the aforementioned $80 billion capital need. But what the trust is able to do is actually hold NYCHA accountable. We have financial reporting, we have asset managers, we have people who are very much responsible for making sure that NYCHA does take care of these properties. Again, tremendously impactful to the resident partnership component is that we have our eyes on NYCHA. So I know that I'm probably already at time. I'm not going to go into this. This kind of goes into a little bit more about what I already said. I do want to slow down and talk a little bit about this because it's one of the more inspirational parts of the program for me, which is that developments become part of the trust by voting. So again, we're trying not to do this to people, but with people. So NYCHA identifies properties that have a really great need, but also a great development opportunity in terms of what kind of debt can be raised against that particular property, and then spends 100 days educating the residents of the development on the different programs that then they are then able to vote for and against. So this is a slide we use a lot when we're talking to residents doing this engagement period. These are the three options that become available to them once they are subject to a vote. I'll start with the Section 9 first. That is business as usual. That's staying with NYCHA. So you have, it's what's called Section 9 funding. It's an annually appropriated fund. It actually does come from HUD, but it's a very small amount of money that HUD is able to provide for each development for ordinary maintenance and repairs. And this is part of the problem, is that it's annually appropriated. So every year it can be cut, it never gets more, but it always gets less. And it's sort of, let's say it's acontextual. It's not tied to whether it's in this kind of neighborhood or that kind of neighborhood, whether the rents are high over here or whether the need is great. It's just sort of a flat figure. PACT program, which is in the middle, some of you may have heard about. This is a program that's about 10 years old, which is very, very similar to the trust in that we have the ability, because I guess I should back up and say it's a public-private partnership where NYCHA enters into a real estate development agreement with a private property manager, and they're able to do all those things I said. It's amazing that a government agency can do. The private sector can do with ease. So they partner with a private sector affordable housing developer to raise a bunch of money to do these renovations, and then they have a private management company come and manage the property as well. So NYCHA pretty much divests themselves of the responsibility for fixing these properties and for managing them. And the trust was very intentionally developed as an alternative to that, to provide the same benefits of having access to this fundraising capability and some of these different ways of achieving construction goals, but remaining in the public sector. So for example, we use union labor. We have a project labor agreement. We retain the public workforce that operates the properties. We are very much about supporting the public sector and supporting the communities directly. And so folks are given the option to select one of these three options. I know I'm a little bit going over, so I'm going to skip ahead. Just want to give you guys a sense of the scope of the projects that we do. A lot of these things on this big color wheel are things that were part of that 2019 agreement between NYCHA and HUD. These are the things that have been consistently problematic in housing developments at NYCHA. Well, I mean, I guess housing everywhere, but these are very directly the things that we are tasked with addressing. So ventilation, for example, is a big root cause of mold. So there's been a lot of issues with mold at NYCHA development. So all of our projects need to renovate and find the root cause of mold and improve that. Pest and waste management, things like that. They're not sexy, these jobs. They're not necessarily about really inspirational spaces, but these are real life safety health issues. They are about dramatically improving the communities and their health and how they're able to live. But elevators that work, you'd be surprised how impactful that would be on your baseline existence. If you can come from a place where your heat works every day and your hot water works every day, you have a tremendous advantage in what you're able to achieve. So this is really what we're trying to do. So very quickly, I'm just going to give you an overview of our portfolio at the moment. So we've had 4 successful votes since December of 2023. I will. You can see here the percent of eligible voters. There's I forget what the minimum is, but we have to have a minimum participation or else the vote is invalid. So there's a real effort to make sure that people are engaged in this process, that people know what they're voting for, that people are actively validated as part of the development. We really want this to be representative of what the development wants, and not just something that is done to them. So our first inaugural property is quite large. It's in Sheepshead Bay, down in South Brooklyn. It's 16 buildings, really, really beautiful community. It is, I think, here, I think, maybe it was on a different slide, we had what the physical has to be found a new apartment for the duration of the construction. They have to be moved out. The construction occurs, and then they have the right to return to their apartment. So you can imagine the logistics and taking care of that. You can imagine also that historically, NYCHA and its residents, there isn't a tremendous amount of trust. So the amount of building of trust that we do with our residents to ensure that we're not kicking them out forever, that they will have the right to return, and they will have the right to return to a renovated apartment. It is a tremendously important and difficult process of engagement and relationship building that we do. This is very exciting. So design work has just started, and the construction will conclude at the end of 2030. So this is quite a long and involved project down in Sheepshead Bay. The second project is up in Soundview in the Bronx, a really, really sweet community, a seniors-only development of 2 buildings. This was a very, very important project in NYCHA's history. It's the first time that NYCHA ever fully evacuated a building because of emergency conditions. So one of the 2 buildings has been vacant for, I think it's about 3 years now, but they've never before done that. This gives you, again, a sense of the urgency of our program and what we have to do. But really a lovely community of seniors up in the Soundview neighborhood. It'll be, even though it's following the Nostrand Houses project in timeline by a little, the construction will be complete in 2028. It's smaller, but also 1 building's already vacant. Most recent procurement that's open right now is down in Coney Island here at Unity Towers. It's a single building, but it's quite large, and it was heavily damaged in Hurricane Sandy. So it's had a lot of infrastructure upgrades already because of the FEMA-funded work that really went around in this area of the city, if you guys were around and knew what was going on there. This job is much smaller in terms of impact. It's really going back to provide some of these quality of life upgrades that we were unable to provide, NYCHA was unable to provide with the infrastructure upgrades. So, as much as I was talking about how important it is to have heating, it also is really impactful to have a modern, clean, renovated apartment when you've been living in squalid conditions for a very long time. And then this is the most recent project, not too far from where we are here in Bushwick. And it is, again, a single building, a little bit later in vintage. It's a 1960s building. We expect the PNA here, which is really just a facility assessment that gets done, is around $90 million. We actually expect this project is going to be more like a $100 or $110 million project. But this is right around the corner from where we are, relatively speaking, or at least it's not as far as Sheepshead Bay, which is not that fun to get to. But this is the most recent project. It voted in only about 6 months ago, and so we're kicking off work there, trying to figure it out. So I have a little more detail about this one because it's the one that's top of mind for me right now. I spoke a little bit about alternative project delivery. Again, a whole other presentation about design build, but we are piloting a new contract type for this region for New York City, and so that's really the work I've been doing lately. So the solicitation's going to come out soon, so I've got all this information about that. It's very, very exciting, but it's probably going to be around $110 million renovation for these folks. Not going to start for a little while yet, but very excited about this one as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it to my next presenter, and I think we're doing Q&A at the end, so I'm just going to leave you with that and move on to the next one.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, good. My name is Mark Ferrari. I'm of 2 different projects, one that's just completed and one that's in process. At Breaking Ground, we believe everyone deserves a home. Founded in 1990, we've grown into the largest developer and operator of permanent supportive housing in New York. Permanent supportive housing is affordable housing with on-site supportive services designed to help people who have experienced long periods of homelessness and often have other disabling conditions to live with dignity and attain long-term stability in housing. It's the gold standard solution to chronic homelessness. We developed a full continuum of services for people experiencing homelessness that first connects them to the services they need to obtain and maintain permanent housing. We also developed a drop-in center and over 700 transitional beds to help people get off the streets while we work with them toward permanent housing. Each year, we serve over 13,000 vulnerable New Yorkers. Permanent supportive housing is less expensive than leaving people to languish in homelessness. Homelessness is expensive to society in ways both obvious and not so obvious. Our core mission remains focused on developing exceptional, permanent supportive housing for those who need it most. To date, we have developed over 4,000 units of supportive and affordable housing in New York City, and we currently have 2,000 more in development. All right, so I'll play this and I'll just kind of do a light narration. So this is Sutphin Boulevard. This is the Sutphin Boulevard elevation. Now you're going in the main entry. This is 173 senior supportive units. So this is the entry vestibule, main lobby. You'll see a stairway at the end. That goes up to a roof terrace garden, which you'll see in a second. Here's a little shot of the male alcove. This was done by Bernheimer Architects, was the designer. Monadnock Construction was the contractor. This is the multi-purpose room right in front of you here, with two skylights coming through from the roof terrace above, which is a very nice effect. And then continuing down the corridor, you get to the main lobby, to the elevators to go up to the apartments. This building also contains, you'll see later, offices for social service support. Now we come back to the lobby stair going up to the roof garden, which faces south and west. And luckily, the rest of the neighborhood is low-rise, two-story houses. So it really has like optimal solar exposure, as you can see. Plants are going in 2 or 3 weeks. Now this is the second story entry to the social service and property and leasing offices. Now we're back in the lobby. Now we're going to go down instead of up. There's more communal spaces downstairs. We have a fire-rated glass side light and door that lead to this stairway that goes down into the basement. There's a computer lab on the left here as you're passing. Now this is the main lobby downstairs, exercise room, library. Note the light cove that the architect designed, which when you're there is a very nice touch that really kind of makes you forget that you're in an underground space. Yeah, well, we put a ballet bar, so if people want to use it for that, they can. This is a typical elevator lobby on one of the floors. Utility closets, electrical closets, and meters along the side there. Now this is going into a one-bedroom apartment. You'll see the kitchenette on the left, the smoke soffit above. One of the very nice features of this building are the windows are rather oversized, and the fact that there's really not a lot of other tall buildings in the neighborhood. All of these apartments get abundant natural light. Now this is going into the bedroom from the living area. There's a one-bedroom unit. This is on the corner of the building. Has really kind of an incredible view. I'd be very happy if I got the chance to live in an apartment like this. And now we're up on the main roof. There's a lower roof, main roof, and then a bulkhead roof. So the project does have solar panels, as you can see. If you look closely in the distance, you can see Manhattan skyline. The views from the top of this building are really quite spectacular. You can see JFK Airport. You can see the Jamaica train station is 3 blocks away right there. So you'll see some of the condensing units. This building uses a VRF system for groups of apartments and for the public spaces. It is Passive House International standard. You can see the energy recovery ventilator units on the right, which serve the residential units. No, unfortunately, it's not, but it would have been pretty cool if they could have worked that out, but no. And then this is a view from the north side of the roof, kind of looking at the neighborhood again with the train station running up Suckman Boulevard, and you can really kind of see for miles from here. This is the health clinic, which was built into the ground and basement floor. Community Healthcare Network is building out this clinic and will be running it. And in fact, they're kind of like a development partner. They had a one-story clinic on the site, and that's kind of how the whole thing bootstrapped. And then they moved elsewhere. This is 1763rd Avenue. This is a renovation project. 97th and 3rd Avenue. This was built in 1973 as a nursing home. It was converted into a CUNY dorm in 2008, and now we're renovating it into supportive housing. So it's a moderate level rehab, this brutalist brick building, which is pretty interesting. This is the model apartment. You're on the 7th floor here. Datner Architects did the design. And here I'm showing you an overlay of the dorm layout, and then it will fade into the new layout. So you can get a sense of what had to be done in terms of rejiggering the spaces to make apartments out of the existing column grid and existing corridor. One of the stipulations was we had to leave all of the bathrooms as existing to remain, because they don't meet current adaptability guidelines. Here are some renderings that Datner did of some of the public spaces, the main entry, mail area. And now this is a typical elevator lobby that's been sheetrocked. We're about 60% through construction right now. We'll be going for TCO in October of next year. And you can see the corridor looking south there. We put a new cooling tower in June. This is set on a lower roof, 1 story below the main roof. So we're putting all new roofing in. This is kind of interesting. This building was added to in 2008, and you're walking in a little strip that was added on so that you can see old posts and new posts. So we're taking some of the old posts out and putting new posts in so that it mates with the layout of the new apartments. That unfortunately was a change order that we didn't really figure out beforehand. But that's the nature of renovation project. This is just showing some of the new kitchen exhausts that were run through the buildings, had to make new penetrations for these. Interestingly, we used a system, FRP, reinforced polymer reinforcement of the slab instead of putting beams underneath because there really wasn't head height for that. So we had a special contractor come in and do all that work. This is again showing all of the infrastructure that's behind the walls once everything is sheetrock. This is showing the kitchen exhaust feed from the smoke soffit on two adjacent kitchenettes. And then all of those shafts you'll see have to get fire rated with 2-hour rated shaft wall and fire stop. Here's one here. You could see the exhaust duct running into the shaft. This is the ground floor entry level. The main entrance is at the end of the perspective there. So these are storefronts that we'll be retaining. So in the cellar on the first floor will be all of the social service offices and management offices, some of which are framed out on the side there. If you look up, there's a lot of new plumbing that comes down and transitions. This is the front of the building. This is all going to be renovated into new plaza areas with planting and seating. You'll see the rendering of that in a second. This is the south end of the plaza. So all these walls have to get rebuilt. And you can see all the green spaces. We have like a cascading wall of greenery coming down on the level chain. And then this is looking from the northeast. On the right is a tenant area that connects to the multipurpose room, which is, here's a ground level view of that. And then this is looking toward the main entrance with the new plaza design. And that's it.
Hi, everybody. As they said earlier, I'm Emma with Brooklyn Community Housing and Services. And I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of an overview of what we do, how our programs are focused, and then talk about some new projects that we have on the horizon, which we're very excited about. So, who are we? We provide housing and services for people that were formerly homeless and are at risk of becoming homeless. We work to empower our residents by helping them develop the tools they need to heal, achieve independence, and thrive as members of the community. And I want to emphasize as members of the community because that is really what I like to call our secret sauce, is that we focus everything that we do around creating community. So how do we, here's a little history. I'll skip past that. We started in 1980 and were founded by, worked to found one of the first scattered site programs in New York. And here's all of the services that we provide. So we have a family shelter where we house 44 mothers and one child up to the age of 8 years old in our shelter. Typically, they are women that have experienced domestic violence, and one of the things that is a trend that we are seeing is that they are oftentimes have severe levels of trauma, and also we are seeing an increase of very severe mental illnesses that impede their ability to be independent. So we also have transitional supportive housing. This is a specific type of housing for people that usually this is their first step out of an institutional setting. So they often require quite a extensive level of care. So medication management, case management. We are working with them to make sure that they are attending their doctor's appointments, making sure that they are not decompensating, making sure that they can achieve the highest level of independence that is possible for them outside of an institutional setting. Then we have permanent supportive housing. That is similar to what Mark, it's same as what Mark just discussed, where it is a traditional lease. Typically, we find that these people have had a severe mental illness or being at risk of homelessness. And then lastly, we have scattered site apartments throughout all of Brooklyn. So this is in your average building, and it is typically, in our case, a person that is referred to us from the Office of Mental Health through the state. And we provide the same kind of support services that we would in a transitional supportive housing setting, but one notch lower than that. So we also offer eviction prevention work. Our Brooklyn Housing Assistance Center works each year to try and help people maintain housing, because it is far more cost effective for people to maintain housing than it is for them to enter into the Department of Homeless Services. We are seeing that on average for a family, it costs about $4,500 for them to maintain housing, whereas if they enter into the shelter system, it's about $65,000. That's a significant increase, and the need continues to grow. And I think we saw about 600 people that we weren't even able to help because they didn't qualify from an income standpoint, but we were able to get them assistance to help them maintain housing. And then an additional 300 people that we were able to help because they met the income requirements. So we like to say that we help to take people from crisis to community. As I said before, we think that community is our secret sauce. We work in various different ways to help people build community, because community is one of the stopgaps that helps people not enter into homelessness. So it's little things coming, such as we have floor meetings with our residents, where it's everything that you would think is going to happen at a floor meeting. People complain about loud music. People say, I don't like that they cook fish because it's stinky. They also say things like, I think my neighbor may be relapsing and they need some help. Or, I'm not able to make my payment. Can you give me some help on vocational stuff? All of those things are taking place in monthly meetings. We also do things like we have a veterans group so that they can maintain the bonds with their fellow people that have entered the service. And all of these things added up together provide a stopgap. So I'm sure that we've all had an experience or know someone that's had an experience where they're like, oh, I have to call my friend because I might have to couch surf for a little while. That's the community that keeps you out of the system. Or I need to get in touch with my family because I have things that are happening. So building those bonds and being able to re-engage with your community is something that is a safeguard that we all have that oftentimes is lost when people are experiencing homelessness. Again, as I said, from crisis to community, these are some of the different programs that we offer. I mentioned the Veterans Assistance, Veteran Initiative. We also have a Healthy Aging Initiative. A lot of our residents are aging in place. And so they, because of their past, oftentimes are experiencing the effects of aging quicker. So they need additional supports around that. We have horticultural therapy. This is one of my favorite programs. I love going and watching people nurture their plants together as a group. We grow vegetables in the summertime, houseplants throughout the rest of the year. There's art therapy, there's drama therapy, vocational assistance I mentioned. And as I said before, why supportive housing? It is significantly less expensive than the the shelter system, then hospitals, then the jailing system. As I'm sure you can all hear in my voice, I come from Alabama, and we don't have any of these supports available there. And it costs the state every year. It also puts a expensive burden on the rest of the social safety net. So I have friends that worked in the library, and they were constantly finding that people were camping out in the library because they had nowhere else to go. So one of the things that's really wonderful about living in New York, one of the reasons why I live here, is that we take care of our friends and neighbors. So here's some projects that we have coming up. 2425 Pacific Street. We went to the groundbreaking on this last Easter, or Easter before last, I guess. And got that underway. We're really excited about this project. We're going to have 142 units of supportive housing. There's a specific subset of this that is going to be supportive housing for families. There is definitely not enough of that in our current system. So as I said before, with our shelter population of families, they are oftentimes sicker than they were in the past, so it's harder for them to get into just standard permanent housing. So they need the additional support. So we're happy to see that there is more units being put into the pipeline for that. One of the things that's really interesting about this particular development is that there is a geothermal system in place. There's another development coming up where we're doing geothermal. We're really excited to see the lower cost because I'm sure you guys know taking care of a boiler every year is a lot and very expensive. So we're excited to be able to have those savings and pass those savings on to our residents. Then we have Kingsbrook Estates. We are anticipating that this will close this year and that we will have a groundbreaking early next year. This is on the same site as the Kingsbrook Medical Center, and we are going to be taking over a few of the buildings in that hospital complex that were underutilized, and we're converting those into affordable housing and supportive housing, particularly for senior citizens and for veterans, because they need additional medical care. So the proximity to the hospital is going to be an extra benefit for them. Also, you'll see here, and I probably should have pointed that out in this one as well. You'll see with all of our projects, we design them with the thought of community, with gathering spaces included in them, so that people can continue to build those bonds outside of the confines of just standard programs. So you'll see that here. And then also there's a nice courtyard here, also viewed from above here. There's going to be a therapeutic garden there, outdoor exercise equipment, all of these things that are going to kind of foster this sense of community that we can integrate into our programming for people's long-term success. Brownsville Cultural Arts Center and Apartments is currently under construction. We attended the groundbreaking for this literally last week, which is so exciting. This project's really great because there's going to be a cultural arts center on the first floor where various people from all of the community of Brownsville can take art classes, take dance classes, learn music, as well as the residents that are living there. And then there's going to be 43 supportive housing units, 290 affordable units, and a subset of our supportive housing units are going to be reserved for children aging out of foster care, which is one of the largest, the fastest growing populations in our homelessness system. So that's exciting. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention one of our current buildings, Brooklyn Gardens, it houses 3 of the programs that I mentioned before. It's about 20 years old. Well, it's really about 100 years old, but it came online for supportive housing. About 20 years ago, we did a renovation on it. And we're about to undergo a $25 million renovation that's going to include living spaces in each building. Each of the units are going to be renovated. An elevator for our family shelter. It's currently, we have a stroller parking lot that we keep outside of the building because you can't cart the strollers up and down the building. And an expansion of our administrative offices. This one is the other one that we're going to have a geothermal heating system in. And we are expanding the seating in our courtyard and creating an outdoor event space where our activities can host movie night or do art projects. We're also revamping our children's play area, and there is a specific subset of the children that we are seeing is we are consistently experiencing about 25% of the children in our shelter are on the spectrum. So we are creating a sensory area in our children's playroom to make sure to accommodate those needs and make sure that they can get any type of therapy that they need within our shelter. We were approved last week for the New York State Registry of Historic Places, and we are currently applying for the federal registry because the Brooklyn Gardens building was the first affordable housing development in the country, we believe. It may be the second in the country, but we believe it's the first one in the country. Created by Louis Pink. I'm sure you've all heard of the Pink houses. So he was an innovator in the affordable housing space. But that's just a little bit about what's going on with us. And I'm excited to answer your questions later on. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jack Esterson. It's really great to be here. My partners are here and some of my staff. We are super local. We're 3 blocks down the road, Metro Tech. We're a very Brooklyn-centric office. We're about 25 people. We were founded in 2012. But I've been an architect for 50 years. So I can't believe I can actually say that. This is my 50th year. And we didn't start off doing housing, but about 30 years ago, we got our first supportive housing project. And just a note about what that is, because we haven't talked a lot about the differential between public housing, affordable housing, and supportive housing. So you've probably gleaned by now that it's for special needs, special groups with a universe of various social or health problems, youth aging out of foster care, people in severe addiction, formerly homeless, people with severe mental disabilities. And so our work started originally with like purely supportive housing, centers for homelessness. We did a lot of work with the Dormitory Authority for long-term residential addiction programs. And eventually that morphed into kind of a combination of affordable and supportive. And the reason that happened was 30 years ago, it wasn't really so hard to build 200 units for people with mental disabilities in East New York, but now it is. With the ascension of local community boards and the power that they hold, which is, I think, great, they say no. We've had enough. We're oversaturated. And they are probably right. And I'm talking about sites that are in outlying area, not Fort Greene. We're talking about Brownsville, East New York, Canarsie, South Bronx, poor neighborhoods that are deeply underserved, and land was cheap. and there wasn't a lot of opposition, but now there is. So what's happening with our clients, which is, I think, really great, is they're mixing. Most of our buildings are not purely supportive housing. We'll talk to, like, these projects are both. And this is a way for the community to be much more accepting, particularly if there's a zoning variance or what's called ULURP. The community boards, you must have their approval. So you have to listen to their needs and their aspirations and their concerns, and act upon it. So our clients are now mixing, for example, people with mental disabilities, with low-income families, with and formerly homeless veterans, and it's just, I think it's just really great because it's about the sort of decentralization of social problems, and mixing various populations together under one roof, which can actually be sometimes challenging to have low-income families living next door to people with serious psychiatric issues, and how that's managed and how that manifests itself architecturally. So we've been doing this work for a few decades, and we love it. We're completely devoted to New York and making New York's communities better and enhancing the lives of people that live there. This is on Grant Avenue. It is in East New York. It's about 200 units, not under construction. Sadly, the site is above a subway station, so it's been kind of years of negotiations with MTA. This was the result of a request for proposal, an RFP, because the city owns a lot of land, and land is everything. Most of our clients are nonprofits, and they can't really compete with private developers with deep pockets. So the city owns land, and they go out for RFP competitively. And this one, we won with a developer for about 200 units. This is affordable families, and a host of other supportive populations. Next. We just finished this building in Bedford-Stuyvesant for low-income seniors and frail elderly under one roof. And I love this project because we talked a lot with the client about how to get seniors moving through buildings, how to get them to interact and socially, because often they self-isolate, for example, or there's psychiatric issues. So the planning inside the building really informed that information. We have a lot of amenities that are adjacent to each other. We think a lot about how spaces are planned to reinforce each other, create a synergy and destinations that people actually want to go to. And that lower picture is the typical apartment. The strategy that we use for all our work is keep it simple. Don't spend a lot of money on the structure. Spend it on bigger windows. And so when you spend it on beautiful brick and nicer kitchens, the things that people actually experience, right? So that studio is tiny because it's an Housing Preservation and Development. It's HPD. They fund most of our projects, and they tell us how big a studio apartment has to be, 350 square feet, right? So the idea of making really big windows and 2 per unit, when you walk in, you're not focusing on, oh God, this is really small. You're focusing on the sort of, you can breathe, and the sun that comes in, and the vistas, and it's very, very nice materials, all very light, and something that Mark was talking about. They're flooded with light, and the people that live there are really happy. Next. Project under construction documents. Super complicated because this building sits on 3 different zoning lots. And it's been, my partners can talk more about that, but they won't. And it's taking years to sort of unravel what that means. I could spend hours, I won't, but it is for the Bowery Residence Committee. And again, it's a mix of affordable and supportive housing in Upper Manhattan. Next, please. Just finished 2 buildings. It was really great because this is for the Archdiocese of New York. They own 2 sites across the street from each other, and they hired us to do both at the same time, and so they both got built at the same time. This is a block and plank building. So it's very structurally extremely simple. So we had the money to devote to things, again, that people actually experience. We bowed the front facade on both buildings, as you can see from the upper right. So it almost creates this kind of sense of embrace on the street that you don't normally experience. Quick story. People were moving in. By the way, when we do these projects, when they're finished, it goes into a lottery system. So this building had 200 units. It's quite desolate, and there's a lot of very poor health outcomes, and as I said, a lot of joblessness. So can't wait for it. It's going to be a beacon, especially at night. I can't wait to see that corner lit up with people working and training and everything. Next. Oh, there it is, under construction. This is about 3 or 4 months ago. It's now been topped out. And we clad it in blue glazed brick, which is like, we've never done that before. We couldn't afford it, but we found a manufacturer in Spain that gave us a really good price. So next. This is another, we do a lot of senior work, a lot of, for low-income seniors and what's called frail elderly, which will soon be under construction. Next. This was actually our first passive house. Somebody mentioned passive house, and it was about eight or 9 years ago, and nobody really, except people in northern Germany, really knew what it was, and we didn't either, but the owner was really enlightened and super into sustainability, and we learned fast. We got it built. HPD was like, no, we can't afford it, no. Somehow the client cobbled together the extra money to build this as a certified passive house project. And I'm not sure what the metrics are, but it does save an enormous sum of utility bills. Next. This is interesting because it's affordable, not so much supportive. There is an African market in Harlem on 116th Street, open air. Our client has an arrangement with the mosque that controls the site. We will be building an indoor African market. The vendors will leave and come back 2 years later, hopefully. On top of that is 2 towers for low-income families. It's fascinating because we don't often do African marketplaces. It's who does? So that's in the construction document phase. Now, next. Oh my goodness, so we love this project, this skinny little project, because this was also a competitive RFP that we won. A lot of our work is from the city, from successful RFPs. Very skinny site, a nonprofit client of ours decided to build co-living for formerly homeless LGBT youth. So, which we've never done that before, and this very thin, narrow site, there was nowhere to go but up in order to get the unit count that we needed. So those sort of double height windows actually are duplex units, and each unit has 8 bedrooms. So we have formerly homeless LGBT youth, 8 of them living together, and they're not related, and they don't know each other, and so that's a thing. And we talked a lot about, like, how does that work? Like, how do you run that? What are there social workers on site, and what if people get crazy? You know, it's just very, very unusual, and we're proud to say that. And this is kind of emblematic of the work that we do. It's unusual. People ask us to do these things that have never been done. This has never been done before. The density of this co-living has never actually been achieved. Next. We sometimes actually don't win RFPs, and this is a project for seniors in Nolita, which was on not a public park. It was actually a kind of a community garden, but we did not prevail. Next. This same project. Lots of RFPs. This one we didn't win. This is in Brooklyn for seniors first. These RFPs keep us really busy. A few months ago, we did 4 of them at the same time, and you have to design a building. It's not a sketch. You're designing up to a schematic level or you don't win. And it's really incredible, and sometimes you do win. More senior housing. As I said, the Dormitory Authority for many, many years hired us to do long-term addiction treatment. This was our largest. It was an old hospital on Ward's Island that was abandoned. It was a complete wreck, full of asbestos. We spent about, I don't know, 25 million completely gutting it, renovating it, and turning it into long-term residential for seriously addicted men and women. And the one sort of architectural gesture that we were able to do on the roof is they wanted a big community room, and there was nowhere to put it. So we built this glulam structure on the roof, which all the residents meet every morning as part of their program. And I've had some incredible teary feedback on that also. Next. It's incredible. This is another long-term drug treatment center. These budgets are really rough, right? So what do? There's no fancy materials. It's all about light and proportion, and people are living here. It's not just another institution. Most drug treatment centers are dreadful. The residents have come from incredibly difficult, I mean, a lot of our incarceration and homelessness. So we filled this building with light. This entire area is a public space that you go through to reach all the amenity spaces. So wherever you are, there's this kind of sense of luminous quality, and I think they really enjoy it. And this was a rather early. I think we did this about 12, 14 years ago. Next. We're almost done. Big project, 200 units, hard up against the Bruckner Expressway. And this one, community access is the client, and they really believe in mixed population. Their original mission was to serve people with mental disabilities, but like I said, that has morphed into mixed buildings. So this is a building where families are living next to people with very serious psychiatric issues, and a lot of them are formerly homeless. And how do you manage that? The executive director, the first meeting he said to me was, we create community within our buildings, and that is your mission, right? So it may be a little bit hard to read, but that middle section is a glass moment for everyone to congregate. They're double height spaces. I don't have a picture of it. So that all the various populations can come together into this common, really beautiful space, because it's just all glass, and you see these views of the Bronx, and these are some interior pictures. Now I think this looks pretty nice, but it's really cheap. Like all that yellow, it's just sheetrock and the linoleum and really, really prosaic materials. And that's kind of what we're about also. Like, how do we do something really inexpensively, but very impactful that affects people's lives? Next. Oh my God. So there's this fantastic developer called Jonathan Rose. He does big projects, and they're very sustainable, and he's a real thinker, and he's fantastic. And RFP came in a close second. Huge project, 7 acres with 7 buildings, all kinds of populations. But we didn't win. Next. So this is the Bridge. The Bridge is a venerable nonprofit, been around forever. Started with mental health services and housing. They bought a site in a very poor part of most of Brownsville is pretty poor, and ventured into something that seemed impossible, which is to get the city of New York to agree to build manufacturing with housing above it. So under all that foliage is an enormous workshop, a series of workshops for local merchants and entrepreneurs, for light industry, like cabinet making and weaving and stuff like that. They're not building cars. So on top of that are these 2 6-story mixed, affordable, supportive housing. This link is where all the amenities are. and it's meant to bring the populations of both buildings together and for social interaction. This took 2 years of incredible negotiations with the DEP and the Planning Commission, just to prove that we could safeguard the residents above a residential use. It's never been done in New York before. Absolutely groundbreaking. It's getting a lot of attention. We're super proud of this project. And Jeremiah, where's Jeremiah? Oh, there you are. Can we do the video now? We have a video too. Can we, because it's about this project. Can we make it bigger? And is there? Oh my God, the video's 3 minutes. I know I talk a lot, I'm sorry. It's not the video, oh. Why not? Okay. It's a really great video. Because it's not me talking, it's the client and the residents, and it's very inspirational. But okay, so is there a tech person that could help? Oh.
174 units.
Oh my.
Housing, half of which are supported housing, and the other half are affordable units. And on the ground floor, we have 40,000 square feet of light manufacturing space.
The partnership probably was the most important from the get-go, that three entities could come together and trust each other and knew that we could complete the job.
It was clearly an equal partnership. They are such good people. For the clients that receive supportive services, we want to make sure that we have case managers that meet with them. We come here to provide support and advocacy. And we want to make sure that you're aware of what your rights are, and we want to make sure that you receive the services that you're supposed to have. And we want to express yourself talent.
I think those are both of them that my father's life was putting out there.
I love it. I love the energy. But anytime I come, I still feel positive. I'm not gonna lie. Anytime I enter that door, I hear.
I'm a part of maintenance workers at GMCC. They took me in from the bridge. What changed my life is the bridge giving me an opportunity to make ends meet for myself. Today, my life is great. God bless me.
The concept had always been to combine manufacturing with residential and to keep the manufacturing. That's the key model here.
Well, the idea behind the project was kind of revolutionary and intriguing to me. And over time, you have more mixed-use zoning. This took it another step. It introduces in the same building an industrial facility and a residential facility.
I love the fact that this project is the first of its kind, mixed use in a former manufacturing zone using MyTech and New Market tax credits. You know, it took us a long time to work with the city. And it was in the beginning a little bit of head scratching, like, you know, they really wanted to get it done and they really worked with us to find solutions.
All the students have president and vibration coordinator, sort of drawing from manufacturing that has been done. We designed the sophisticated ingredients to meet needs of the tenant while also protecting the tenants upstairs.
We didn't really have a shop to start doing custom millwork. This facility has allowed my business to grow, being more efficient with timing and producing for our clients.
It was a complex combination of diverse population, but also diverse activity. A community village, industrial space, big landscape element, hundreds of apartments, amenity spaces that all had to integrate together into a single whole.
It's inviting. It's inviting, it's welcoming, it's respectful, and when you sort of walk through the community spaces and the outdoor space is large and accessible, it just feels like a really nice place to live.
So I guess, to keep mentioning, people are getting involved in this sort of humanity, social humanity
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, who has a question for the panel?
Hey Emma, how are you? Good. I'm wondering, when you do take on these renovation projects, do you go into the community board's yearly budget and review and analyze what they usually, because they come in and they take, I guess, an account of what NYCHA needs, like senior housing grab bars in certain houses in the Bronx and like auditorium repairs for local schools. Do you take that into consideration, or do you do your own independent research? Expecting this.
So since we are a nonprofit that is fully enclosed and we're not bringing in new people or extending our footprint, I would guess that we are doing internal research. That is all managed on our construction side of things. I'm sorry, I'm just the person that asks rich people for money. Like, but what? Also, we don't do NYCHA facilities. It may be.
No worries. I'm just trying to understand the question. So are you asking whether we talk to the community, non-NYCHA community members and ask if they want the renovation? Or are you asking if we bring in social services, how do we determine which social services to bring in? I see. Okay, so how does NYCHA make the decision as to which properties are eligible to vote into our program? Is that the question? Right. Right. So no, I'll say that the way that NYCHA operates, they're obviously within communities, but NYCHA really are communities onto themselves, I will say. And for good or for ill, they are very. And I would say for ill because I think some of the other conversations we've had about integrating different populations, different needs. I think this is a really strong social housing concept that has been largely America's been lagging in its progressiveness in that regard. This is a very sort of European, Northern European, Western European concept that has been very successful. And NYCHA has had a long history of being very isolated. So they do a lot of research. It's not just, let's say, desktop research in absence of NYCHA residents' input, but really the input from the community is from the NYCHA community, not as much from the community boards themselves.
Hi, another question for you. In terms of the, uh, uh, I guess the main question is this basically kind of a land trust that's been created? And are there plans for reusing that land for some kind of commercial development in the future in order to finance some of these projects? Or I just noticed that there was something about uh, the way that the ownership structure starts to break down via land leases, that there's something that's being gained there by the preservation trust. Like, how does the ownership recirculate back into future developments, or even the one that you're on, the parcel that you're on?
So I think it was also a nice point that was brought up about how large of a landowner the city of New York and NYCHA both are. They own a tremendous amount of the physical real estate of our city, and a lot of folks at HPD and various other agencies are struggling with how to maximize the usage of these properties. So I'll say two things. Hopefully they'll get around answering your question. One is right now, the trust is really not looking to do any infill development at the moment. We are not doing new construction yet. There's nothing in our legislation that precludes either of those things, but we're kind of starting with the renovations of existing developments, not adding any units or anything like that at the moment. So that's, I think, one piece of your question is really about sort of the utilization of the real estate portfolio and how can we work on it. The other part of your question, I think, is about the underlying ownership of the parcel. So NYCHA does remain the city remains the, well, it's NYCHA, so they're kind of their own animal, not necessarily the city, but they remain the underlying owner of the property, of the land. The trust enters into a 99-year ground lease with NYCHA. So for all intents and purposes, we do control the land kind of, in perpetuity, but a lot of the administrative and regulatory pieces around being a public housing authority. We are not a public housing authority, a PHA, and that's why we can do a lot of the things we can do. But again, this kind of gets into the hundreds of millions of pages of regulatory documents with HUD and various things about really about disposing of property. So I figured I'd get some questions a little bit about what the future of this looks like in terms of the current administration and its relationship to HUD and federal housing in general. One of the reasons that our program, so our program relies on a federal program called Section 8. You saw before there was Section 9. So we do Section 8 conversions. That's the administrative mechanism that we use to get more funding. Section 8 has historically been has had broad bipartisan support. Because of this thing I just kind of mentioned briefly about disposing of properties, you can equally benefit public housing authorities and private developers with this program. So depending on how you kind of navigate the regulatory piece, you can actually, as if I'm NYCHA, I can dispose my real estate to a private entity and allow them to develop it, or you can dispose to a sort of publicly organized agency like myself. So in general, it's managed to kind of ride in between different political interests. As we, I think, all know, anything goes these days. But in general, one feels that it's a politically safe program in that regard. But part of this really it's really in the kind of hundreds and millions of HUD regulatory pieces. But NYCHA does retain the underlying ownership. We enter into a long-term ground lease with them. So we do become, in effect, the owners of the property, but there's still a public housing authority that really owns the property underneath.
I've got one for Jack. So the Nolita project, was that Elizabeth Street Community Garden? So in the failure of that, not going ahead, did you learn anything in particular that would help to overcome those obstacles on the next project?
Every project's really different. That one stood out as incredibly controversial, and we kind of knew it would be. And I'm really happy we didn't win because it ended up in court for years, and it's canceled now, right? So this was actually a community garden. It was a vacant lot. The city owned it, and it was filled with architectural artifacts and fountains and stuff, and people loved it. People in the NoHo neighborhood. So they came to think of it as a community asset that they kind of owned, but they didn't. The city owned it. We have a huge housing crisis, and they wanted to build senior housing. But we entered it. We had a developer that wanted to do it. We really had second thoughts because we knew this was going to be painful. Like, really, like people marching on the streets, painful. And it was. But does that inform the next one? Well, maybe it's like trust your instincts more. No, I really thought this was not going to go well. So you really need to trust your instincts, and you also need to learn when to say no. And we're not great at that. We in the very early practice, we were so complimented that people would want us to do RFPs with them, right? And for some and now we have to say, well, maybe they're not the right team. Maybe they're not big enough. Maybe they don't have enough experience. Maybe they're not very nice people, and we have said no now. So I guess maybe that's the lesson. I don't know.
I think learning when to say no is a is a hazard that this profession has. We tend not to do it. Julie.
Hi, related to that, I'm on the Director Brooklyn AIA team that's here. I am wondering, because I've always tried to get into affordable housing, it's so hard as a small practice to enter and have anyone want to work with you because of the payment structure. I think you don't get paid till you're 40% in DD or something. But but I don't know. So could you tell me on those competitions that you enter, are you fronting the money, or is the developer kicking in, or how does that work? Because it's good. I think it's good for students to hear, but also practitioners.
It's a great question. And it's kind of the bane of our existence, right? And it's deeply unfair the way everything is structured in affordable and supportive housing. So the dilemma stems from public agencies that fund bricks and mortar don't like paying for fees. So that's a problem.
I'm going to have to take the mic when you're done.
Okay, so the public agencies we have worked with don't like paying for fees, or they don't like paying them in a timely manner when we actually do the work, right? So we've gotten smarter about it. Your comment about 40% DD is not a fact. It's not. It's very variable, right? So the first really big affordable project that we did, the client wanted us to defer 50% of our fee for like 2 years, right? Well, we're not that big an office. We don't have corporate work to support the nonprofit work, and we went broke. We actually had to take out a huge loan to float the office. It was deeply unfair, and we didn't get paid until what's called the closing, the finance closing, which can be 2 years later, right? And then you get paid for all the money that you've earned, right? So that is really hard to support. And we've got, since we agreed to that 50%, we've never done it again because it almost ruined us. We almost went under, right? So then it became 30%. We'll agree to 30, and then 20, and now we're kind of saying no. And we're saying no because we can now. We're not desperate for work. We have a reputation in the city. Those guys in Brooklyn that do beautiful affordable, we want them. And when you create that reputation and desire, you have leverage, right? Not always. It also depends on how badly you want the project. How big is it? But we won't agree to huge deferred, it's called deferred payment, because the agencies we work with will not front that kind of money. Our fees can sometimes be $1 million. Sounds like a lot, but it's not. So you just can't run an office that way. Now, there are affordable developers on the private side. So there's private developers and there's nonprofit developers. The private developers tend to have deeper pockets and almost always will pay their bills upon the work, right? They don't demand deferred payments. Nonprofits often do, not universally, but often, and it's extremely painful. And it's just not right. It's not fair to work for 2 years at 50%. Our profit margin is 15 or 10, you know, and so we're really floating financially our clients, and it's deeply unfair, and I don't see how it's going to get fixed, honestly.
So I'm gonna step in.
Hey, your architect, Mark?
I think we're over time. We're kind of over time. Oh no, that's okay. It's okay. I think it is incredibly challenging to be a small firm and to try to work for some of these organizations. But you referenced a couple different kinds of funding, and they all present different problems, right? So you mentioned private sector and nonprofit developers, and I am a public sector developer, so I may be the worst of all these worlds. But I will say that it is not the intention ever of a public agency to defer payment. What we have a challenge with is the New York City OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. And so if you, I know we're a little bit late in here, but there is a lot of work by myself and other folks to actually reform the appropriations process for city-funded projects. So if it's a city subsidy, this is different than what you were just talking about with affordable housing, private sector, or nonprofit developers. So there is a terrible problem, it's true, with city agencies, because in order for them to get the money to pay you, it's essentially on a reimbursement basis for them as well. So they have to be reimbursed, and the definition for things that can be reimbursed is incredibly bureaucratic and very, very administratively burdensome for the agency to do. So in order for them to get the money from the city that was promised, it's really tough for them to do it as well. So there is a backup of problems in the funding that trickles down to small firms in a really unfortunate way. And then there's just the simple problem of payment processing once we have the money. So there's a lot of really, really terribly burdensome administrative red tape that there are people, really, I promise, there are a lot of people who are actively working to try to remove that. If you can Google the Capital Process Reform Task Force that's been active for the last couple of years, this is one of the chief things that they do. The other thing I'm just gonna make a plug for a second is I've been kind of teasing at it a little bit, but we work on these design build contracts at the moment, and so we award these contracts to entities that can be formed on a project-specific basis, but they are design and construction teams together. So it's usually contractor-sponsored. It's not often designer-sponsored, although sometimes they'll have the designer enter into it. But these are larger and deeper pocket entities that actually can afford to pay their designers prior to financial closing in order for their work to be reimbursed at a higher percentage rate than 50%. So it's not a problem that folks on my side are unaware of, and generally speaking in municipally funded projects. But I will also say that there needs to be more advocacy on behalf of people who are designing these programs. Designers need to be a hell of a lot better at negotiating when they work with contractors in these design build contracts, because, I mean, I had to chuckle to myself. We are, and I'm a recovering architect, as we said, terrible at saying no, terrible at negotiating. We get paid so much less than contractors and engineers, I would say, even generally, but our work is the work that needs to be done to enable the project. So it's definitely not our fault as a community, but it's absolutely our responsibility to be louder about it. And I assure you, there's no public agency that likes being in arrears to its designers. It's a problem that's taken very seriously.
Do we have one more question?
Also, I just want to say nonprofits are also not getting paid. So this is kind of a universal, yeah, it's a universal problem.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that supportive housing succeeds when both the physical building and the wellness is invested in. What are some design or programmatic strategies that you found successful for long-term resident health? And what are ways that those could be in future New York City projects implied?
I can answer. So as I said in my presentation, the emphasis on community and also building that into the building. So for instance, we have our Navy Green facility where the lobby is structured like museum steps. So as everyone's walking into the building, there's a place for them to congregate. We do movies there every Friday night, and we have a community room where we do our horticultural therapy. We, as part of our design process with that building, built out a place where we could do horticultural therapy outside as well as inside, because it's such a key part of our programming.